Invited on a Saturday, planned on a Sunday, delivered on Monday, with a Joycean pause for a wake on Tuesday, then energetically installed by Paul on Wednesday. I hope you enjoyed it. That, to me, constitutes a pop-up exhibition. It is rather good in that there's no time to agonize about it. You don't think, you spend ages normally at an exhibition fiddling around. Right. The two panoramas on the screen were a late substitution. From an idea by my colleague Jude, an attempt has been made to match an 1824 panorama with one from the same viewpoint in 2024. The 18 was made by stitching together 5 colour lithos by Harvey Wood from the Victoria Art Gallery collection. Well, the 20 is a 28-shot photographic pano that I made on New Year's Day. The weather was appalling about that time, if you remember, and we discovered there was a little window on New Year's morning, so we rushed out and we did it, climbing up a ladder and having a very long extended tripod. It was interesting to do. I'm not so happy with the result. The amount of growth that surrounds the site at the moment is a bit unpleasant. Now, the former image was what was planned. This was actually what was realized. This is downstairs in the show. And unlike all the other images downstairs, which are printed on paper, this is printed on linen, on canvas. It's a specially treated canvas that you buy for a wide format printer, and it takes an image pretty well. These are 7 foot long, and the top has been rolled and machine stitched along the top to make a loop, and a steel rod inserted, and then it's been hung from 3 points, as you can see. 1, 2, 3. Again, I think the 1824 came out slightly better. To show correspondences, here is the 1824, a detail of it. I really get the feeling that Harvey had somehow forgotten about the Abbey and inserted it a bit late. And then if you look, that's the new panorama overlaid on the old, and I can actually switch backwards and forwards so you can see. There is a good deal of correspondence. The buildings do line up at the sides. In fact, I much prefer this amalgamation to my own panorama, but I think it actually brings it out rather well. That is printed on paper and it's downstairs. Printing on canvas is fine for various things, but it doesn't have the level of detail that a paper print has. Sorry about the whistling. Right. Just to let you into a secret, I made myself a number of small notices to make sure I wasn't forgetting things, and I cut them up neatly, and I made a stack, and suddenly I realized I had an unmanageable stack of cards. So what I've actually done is stick them all back together again, and so we're back on more or less the right. Let's go to the next slide. Before making the colour lithos, Harvey Wood made a gigantic 12-foot scroll. Both the collection of the 5, and this is made up of 7 images. They're all in the Victoria Art Gallery collection. And I had fun photographing it with Jim Riceley's help. This is a detail from somewhere up here. You can see how the scroll is actually quite a marvelous way of showing panoramas. And you'll see later that there are a number of different applications of scrolls as well as conventional things. I was surprised looking at this 12-foot job to see there was something indicated as a gasometer. And I thought, what, 1824? And I looked it up, and in fact, it seems that Bath was quite an interesting early adopter of gas for light. And if you go to the Upper Bristol Road, you can still see the old building with Bath Gas and Light on the top of it. I'm not sure what the building's now used for. It certainly ain't for gas and light. The gasometers have always been of interest to me. Just as photographing objects or photogenic objects. I have made a panorama of all three together from what I think is called the City Farm. And then I also went later and discovered I could actually get in this close to the last one. Emboldened by this, I made contact with the gas board, or whoever it was by then, and asked if I could actually go into the structure. Because as a 360 pano person, the idea of being in the middle of a circular lace-like object like this was really very attractive. And they said, "Oh, sorry, sir, you were not honest trained." So because I wasn't honest trained, I didn't get in there, and it's now been pulled down. If we step to one side a moment, all the photographs before have been taken with a conventional camera and various wide-angle lenses. This, I thought I ought to remind people that you can make perfectly good panoramas with a phone, provided you put it on a tripod. This is actually 4 shots in portrait mode back up on Beach and Cliff, and I like this skyscape. I thought I detected a celestial something forming in the clouds here, but I'm not actually sure. Okay, having looked at various things, I thought it was appropriate that we should look at our first 360. It's set to automatically rotate, and I'll let it do so for you to have a look. I can't think of a better place other than the middle of that gasometer to make a 360 panorama of Bath. And this one, you can actually zoom in and see quite a lot of detail. Notice that you can't read the number plates of the cars. There isn't quite that much detail. You can wander around. You can check the tourists. Here they are, neatly. This was a march a couple of years ago, I think. And of course, you can look up at the foliage, and it might remind you that one of the prints downstairs has actually got a similar view to this in it. You might be interested in the kit. Conventional panoramas are made with a DSLR and a wide-angle lens on a pano head. A pano head rotates around the focal point of the lens and gives you a stitchable image. Normally for something like the one you've just seen, it will be 6 shots round horizontally, 1 up for zenith, there's one down for nadir, and you stitch them all together and you get a complete sphere of information. You can, as I said earlier, make panoramas with phones. My slight apology for the color difference. I think that's what happens when you use a phone to take these 4 images, and then you use the camera to take images of your phone, and the color goes wrong. However, right, I've been among other things, I've been photographing exhibitions and preserving them. When people have a show here, I usually offer a 360 panoramic record for them, and these are some examples, but they're not all from here. This is Dick's engineering bath thing from last year, which is about to repeat. This is one of the collections exhibitions, and here is one from the VAG. Now, what's interesting about this is that in addition to the 16mm lens to capture the 360 view, you can also put in a longer lens, which means, remember that we couldn't read the number plates of the cars. This is an exhibition in quite a big space, and we can actually go in enough to read the very small plates. This is a technique that's actually marvelous for exhibitions, and one that I discovered a few years ago. This show is about the Ellises and Corsham. Clifford and Rosemary Ellis ran what was called Bath Academy of Art. I was a student there from 60 to 63, and Rosemary taught me photography. The exhibition does actually have a number of their earlier pieces from, these are what I suppose was once called commercial art, made before the Second World War. There's rooms full of them, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different views. The bit that's perhaps most interesting is this little set of prints. Corsham was actually a marvelous art school, and probably the reason was that there was a single person, Clifford, in charge, and everyone who taught was a visiting artist who was usually brought in from London and came down for a day or 2 days, and they had nothing to do with the administration of the school. He did all that quietly, and they did all the teaching, and it was really rather good. I was a student there from 60 to 63, and then when Clifford had retired, because I think I was into something of bad odor, in 73, I was asked back to do some teaching, and it was a marvelous art school. This little collection of small prints here is called Corsham in a Box, and it is an example of work from people like Howard Hodgkin and John Eves and so forth, all of whom were asked to contribute a small piece of work, and it's now in a record. But this is a memorial of a very good art school, and perhaps actually a very good way of running an art school. A hint here, perhaps. Excuse me. I don't know what's happened to this. The Zoom is misbehaving a bit. Okay. Well, I want to leave the meeting, but we'll see what's happened. If I hear a squeak from downstairs. As you know, all our lives were transformed a while ago by COVID. The world really closed in, and initiatives were stifled. You didn't go anywhere. I mean, I think we were in Belgium, having been over there to see a show, and we heard that COVID was creeping up through Italy, and it arrived in France, and we scuttled home, and the world shut down. I was actually very fortunate in that I discovered virtual art galleries. I couldn't go to real ones because they were all closed. This place was really locked down, if you remember, and it only continued to exist through the online things that people did. But this was a really rather nice discovery. It meant that though I was shut in at home, not shut in, but there are no initiatives, but it did mean that one could plan and fiddle around with exhibitions from the desktop. The models, which are contributed by a very nice Belgian developer called Christophe Meerlaan, which come complete with navigation and art placer. I'll show you that in a minute. They're free to download. So anyone who's at all taken with the idea of using a virtual gallery, you can do it without too much trouble. This is a picture of a virtual space. Let us go in. Here we are. Now, what's the difference? Well, the answer is you can move around. This is a three-dimensional space, and it's got all sorts of images. Now, when you click on an image, it's very nice. It sort of swims up to be parallel with the picture plane. This is my friend Malcolm with an exhibition of very large plates that he did that are dwarfed into insignificance by the vast interior of this temple of capitalism, which is #1 Canada Square. You'll see some different views of that in a bit. Let me see. You can move around the space readily. You can choose whatever you want to see. And they all, for instance, these are downstairs. You've seen them, no doubt. And you can also use voiceover labels, which I think I actually discovered that myself. Here's one.
Inside the Great Mosque of Cordoba, this astonishing building was started in 785 when Cordoba was the capital of Al-Andalus.
That to me makes a lot of sense, because otherwise you have to start sticking little labels on the walls, and I much prefer this as a means of doing it. Here's
Malcolm Ross White in his creative cupboard at Corsham Court, preparing for his show on the left at #1 Canada Square in London.
Right. If you wanted to do this, you would switch on something called Art Placer, which is available in all sorts of commercial manifestations nowadays, but I highly recommend this because it's free. You get the same thing, perhaps a few more bells and whistles, but this works perfectly well. Let me find one that hasn't got a voice in it that's rather annoying. Right, so you can set the size of the thing, you can set the position, and if you want to, you can add voice information or a link to a website. It's not hard to learn, and I find it very satisfactory, not just because the world was closed in during COVID, but I like playing with images. It's also actually rather good to take an image and say, what would it be like if it was 20 foot wide? And you just stretch it. Well, all you do is actually enter the information here and off you go. Here's another one.
In the entrance hall of Luc Besson's Cité du Cinéma in Paris, this huge complex of sound stages, workshops, and a film school is the realization of his dream of Hollywood on the Seine. On the left is a flying taxi of my favorite Besson film, The Fifth Element.
But I find this flooring they've made. This place was a power station that ran part of the metro, and eventually it reached the end of its days, and I think it was just derelict for many years, and Besson managed to get it rehabilitated, and it now is a terrific place for making films, making movies. Right, now, on all these things, oh yes, something else. You're asked to enter VR. I shall address that in a second. Each model has a thing that's, the convention is, it's called a doll's house. and you can actually steer your model round, and you can look at the things, make sure you've got everything you want, and then you can reset the view. So it's not hard to do, but I found it very satisfying. And as I say, ArtPlacer is part of the free kit, navigation around the model. Christoph has made about a dozen different models. They're quite complicated to make. You have to use something that I'm slowly learning called Blender, which is a hugely complicated three-dimensional modeling program, but it's also free. But it's a marvelous thing, but it takes some. I'm kind of halfway through a model of the gallery downstairs, and eventually I will be able to do this with it. Right, let's peering blindly. Oh yes. So if you wanted to enter VR, what would you use? I was actually going to bring some of these, but in a way, there's an example of this downstairs in one of the cabinets. I've used this, that, and this. I haven't yet used the Apple one because I don't think it's even this side of the Atlantic. These are the first non-tethered headsets. I mean, I did actually use tethered headsets before. You can plug it into a computer. They're very useful, but you are constrained by this cable, right? Sort of umbilicus that's holding you to your laptop or whatever. I much prefer these. This actually was a very probably the first successful non-tethered, very light, extremely comfortable headset. Let me see, I've got them down. Oculus Go, Oculus Quest 3, Pico 4, which I have, and that I find it better than that. It's better balanced. It's got its battery at the back. And then this thing, which, as I say, as far as I know, nobody this side of the Atlantic's yet got one. They are stupendously expensive, and they will actually get cheaper, I'm sure. Now, what's interesting about these is that they all use controllers. The little Oculus at the top here uses a single controller. You get a little kind of beam within the virtual image, and you point it to things, you make it change. These, you have two controllers. So you have two hands, and we've all seen these things on television where you get idiots dancing around with pairs of controllers. What's marvelous about the Apple machine is that they've completely done away with those. So when the Vision Pro gets down to just be the ordinary Vision and probably a little bit cheaper, at the moment it's several thousand quid, it is really a very expensive object, but you control your position in the world by gaze, looking hard at something, and by haptics. You simply wave your hands around and you do things with your fingers, and that gives you your navigation. The whole point about these virtual spaces is how do you move around them? And they seem to have, they were very late coming to, I mean, there were all sorts of rumors about what Apple were doing. Nobody knew. And then finally this thing came out, and the reviews from sensible people who've actually played with it, there are lots and lots of views. People don't like it because they've never even seen one. But the people who've actually used the thing say it is a magnificent piece of work. It not only gives you access to your virtual world, but it allows you to look through it to things outside and combine the two. So you have augmented reality overlaid on top of your virtual reality. I think that could well be something really quite interesting. Now, I'm going to risk going back to some historical examples for you. First of all, let's have a look. I do like the way this swims around. Okay, this is what we set up in the oil paint store of the Victoria Art Gallery to photograph the scroll. Now, this was, I made a point of saying, right, I'm not going to touch the scroll, and so Jim did it all. We weighted it down with little perspex blocks at the side. The camera, as you see, is cantilevered over with a ring light on there, and it's counterweighted with a house brick in a little bag. And this actually worked quite well. So the camera remained completely static, and we slowly inched the 12-foot ancient piece of canvas underneath it, and we took lots and lots of photographs. And we got a fairly good stitch. When you make a conventional panorama, you always go for about a 20% overlap. And then the stitching software can blend the two things together, usually without too much trouble. So this actually worked quite well. Above is a very nice little image from a firm in Berlin called Round Not Square. And Round Not Square make scrolls. And I've got one in plan. I really want to have one done, but they wouldn't make things from single viewpoint panoramas like the thing on Beach and Cliff. You would tend to make some shots and say you would move down a street and take images and then butt them together. And this would actually give you the thing in a packet. And here is a marvelous thing. It's a 19th century facsimile of a certain fairly famous piece of needlework that we will all see. Yeah. I know the Bayeux tapestry is about something that I find less popular, not being very pro-Norman, but it is a marvelous piece of work. And this is a very nice realization. These pillars are oak, and you've got two winders, and it allows you to go through the panorama by winding the knobs at the top. Had we not been oppressed by copyright, I would have played you a bit of pop music at this moment, because this was actually in the collection of Charlie Watts, the late lamented, very good drummer from the Rolling Stones. Right, let's swing round a bit and look at something. This is a panorama, but it's not 360. It's a wide-angle view. It's taken from drawings made on the South Bank near Southwark, and it looks across. Let me zoom in a bit. It's by a Czech artist called Holler, and here you can see the old St. Paul's, soon to be consumed in the Great Fire of 1666. But it's a very nice engraving. I think I've read two accounts. One says the engraving was done in Amsterdam, and the other says it was done in Antwerp. So I'm not at all sure which is which. Now, I don't know, afterwards I'll ask you, how do you rate this way of looking at pictures as against an ordinary slideshow? I actually find it much more interesting, but anyway, I'll see what your reaction is after. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the first 360 panorama. This was made in the 1780s, I think, by an Irish artist entrepreneur called George Barker. He stood on a hill in Edinburgh, and he drew all around himself. And he was so sudden, I mean, it must have been a revelation, because lots and lots of people had done wide angle things before. He actually did the whole business. You can actually take this image and you can put it in a 3D viewer and you can look right round. It does work. And not only did it work for him and us now, he took it to London. He had a huge building built. He made an absolute fortune, because in those days, the immersive panorama must have been like the IMAX cinema. And just to show you how entrepreneurial he was, let's go up here. This is his great panorama. This is the first panorama building that I've ever heard about. And It's got two different panoramas. It's got two levels. So there were two panoramas being shown at the time. These are gigantic paintings, 360 all the way around the viewer, and so immersive that people, when they had seascapes, people reported they were seasick. It really does work. I've been to one in Holland, in The Hague, and it is completely compelling. How they work is very nice. You go into a little sort of tunnel, you go up a flight of stairs, and all you see when you get onto the viewing platform is what they want you to see. So you don't have anything to break the magic. You are immersed, and it is very effective. In this case, he had two things going at once. This bloke was really inventive. And so you, presumably to get to the top platform, you can see little pieces with their canes and things. And strangely, this building, which was 1790 something, just off Leicester Square, it's still there. But it's a kind of different palace of illusion. It's a Catholic church. It's called, sorry about that. It's called Notre Dame de France, and it's been extensively renovated. It's got some rather interesting pioneering cast iron work, I read. But this is the building. It's still in exactly the same place. It's a huge cylinder, and you can visit. And over there, rather poor detail, I'm afraid, there are some nice murals by Jean Cocteau, the surrealist filmmaker. I'm sure you all know his work. Right. We do need to say, sorry about this, Bob. He objects to my bad work here. Balloon rides were fairly common in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. Sorry, 18th and 19th. And there were various ways. So you could actually go to Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens, you could pay some money, you could go up in the balloon, and you would see that London laid out before you, which was very interesting 3D view. And some people actually made a point, this was a sort of scientific experiment in which someone went up in a balloon and they attempted to draw the whole 360 landscape around them. And it is quite an interesting way of presenting. But you can see that people were trying to present this complicated new view of the world. And this was one. Barker's genius was and there are accounts of people going up the Alps in Switzerland, rhapsodizing about the view of the mountains and things, but they didn't capture it. And they didn't bring it to Leicester Square and let you see it for 4p or whatever he charged. So that's Barker's genius, really is finding out a way to present. And he also, of course, he patented the word panorama. It was soon spread throughout Europe. It was very, very, well, let me see, I've got a list somewhere. Yes, then for some reason, the panorama buildings are now referred to as cycloramas, but they're the same thing, and they still exist, unlike Barker's, which is now a church, as you've seen. They exist in The Hague, I've been to it. They exist in Waterloo, Atlanta, Sevastopol, Gettysburg. There are lots of them. There is a very famous Russian artist who was extremely good at painting these gigantic scenes. Now, I wanted to enthuse about this book. If you're at all interested, you can now get, I put it in the bag, a copy of this book on the painted panorama. It was probably 40 quid when it was published. It's now less than a tenner second hand, and they're in extremely good condition. And I thought to make a point about it. I would donate a copy of it to the members' library downstairs so that anyone who comes to Brillsea and wants to know more about the painted panorama can actually have a look at the book. What's marvelous about it is that it has an enormous fold-out prints. Here's a copy. I'm going to get back to the Zoom thing, haven't I? And you can actually take these prints, and they are beautifully done, beautifully sewn into the book. And as I say, it's now less than a tenner. It's published by written by Frenchmen in extremely good English, and here's one of his painters, Pierre something, I've forgotten the name, and that's I folded it out and made a rough photograph of it, of a view of Paris. Lacoste, I think it's called. Right, what else is there? Right, we're nearly there. This was I very much like César Pellé's marvelous skyscraper in the middle of Canary Wharf. It's 50 stories high, and to me, it's one of the best designed skyscrapers in London. And they are, of course, there are lots of them are so unbelievable. So I set about making a panorama innocently there with my tripod, and I got my 6 shots round, and I was getting ready to do the upshot, and 2 very large armed security people came and they said, well, you know what they said, and I was told to stop. I didn't realize that there's a differentiation between the space here where I was, which is somehow private, and the space here near the railway station, near the metro, sorry, which is public. And so after a bit, I discovered there was a sort of survey in The Guardian about this pseudo public space problem. And so I sent them this panorama, and they published it at the head of the article, and it seemed very pleasing. But I still was slightly rankled by the fact that I hadn't been able to complete the thing as well as I had wanted to. Now, I have a friend who has access to this building. This is it. And he got us permission to go to the very top, indicated by this red blob here, and to take a panorama. Now, I wanted to try something I had actually tested before, but never used in earnest. You can imagine you can take a camera and put it on a tripod. You can have a very extended tripod and put it up here. A man in Texas came up with the idea of what he called the fishing rod technique, which is that you actually make the horizontal, you make the pole horizontal. It means that your camera is out there in space. And so, galvanized by this thought, we went up. Here's a video.
Here we are, 50 stories above Canary Wharf. The camera held horizontal over the edge of the balustrade, with a wire around the shoulders, just to make sure.
Hang on, let me try and do something about the sound. As people keep pointing out, sound here is not optimized, especially for Macs. Well, I'll describe it to you. In a minute, you're only going to get wind, and I don't mean of the flatulent nature. So here we were, leaning over the balustrade. I took the comic title of Titanic because it did look suddenly like the prow of a ship, and Heine and I held onto this long pole with the camera out there, 3,000 or 4,000 quid's worth, with a wire loop around my shoulders just to make sure. And then you, instead of taking 1, 2, 3, 4 like that with a wide angle lens, with a fisheye, you take 1, 2, 3, 4, but rotate it horizontally. And I then made this video. Apologies that the sound isn't optimal.
Illustrated.
Among other things, you can see how awful the other skyscrapers are in the locality. But looking 50 stories down like this was really quite frightening. In a minute, the camera turns around and see over the tips. Right. That's enough of that. Oh.
So that was all done around a single axis for rotating the camera.
Yes, absolutely.
The video made it rotate.
Well, I was able to fiddle with the result. I mean, once you have a sphere of information, you can look anywhere you like in it. And I felt that was quite a good presentation of the business. But it was, I was amazed. Suddenly I read somewhere in some site or something about this business, about using it horizontally. It had never occurred to me. I mean, I'd done various things with lengths of poles. I did one once in the circus in which the pole was so long that I discovered I couldn't hear whether the camera had worked or not. But generally speaking, it's a really rather nice way of working. Bees, we've seen that. Right. Okay. We've looked at quite a number of actually, there's something else I'll show you in a minute. We've looked at quite a number of things in which we talked about a sphere of photographic information. You're standing at the center of the sphere and you're looking out. I thought it'd be nice to contrast it with a technique that's reasonably, it's available on the phone, either Android or Apple, and it's called Luma AI. And you simply walk around a three-dimensional object. Now here, when I was finding out how to do this, I went to the Southeast Asia art exhibition, and I went upstairs in one of their rooms. There was nobody there at all to say, no, you can't do that. And so I walked around this little case. The lighting is not optimal because it's a mixture of interior light and daylight from the windows, but it does produce a fairly good example of a fairly good capture of a three-dimensional thing. If I just stop this for a second, and if I can find it, it's possible to export these models into a 3D modeling program, and then you've actually got much more control. But you see the downside of what I did in I hadn't got any information from above it because of the glass case, so there's no information there at all. I also couldn't get underneath it, so it's hollow. But you do actually have a fairly good capture of a three-dimensional object, and as I say, it's free, and anyone can download it. I was actually going to finish, well, I'm going to finish with some addresses and things in a minute, but I want to show you this before I do. Let's hope that goes over in Zoom as well. Come along. Right. How am I going to do this? How to do that? No. If I can see this, it'll be a miracle. Desktop. We're almost done. Ah, here we are. Now, and there's a nice little story that goes with this. This is a library called the Biblioteca Joannina, I believe, and it's in Coimbra University. This is a full 360, so it's possible to see all aspects of the thing. There's Claire keeping an eye on the guards. Tripods and things were completely forbidden. So this was actually a handheld 4 shots with the 10.5 lens. But you can see it was actually worth doing. There were about 20 errors in this that I had to correct in Photoshop, but it's imagine going into a white cube. Why would you bother to make a 360 panorama of that? Because it would just, but to go into this space, it's so panogenic, if that's the right word. I really wanted to capture it. And then when we'd done that, we were told of a rather peculiar thing. Let's see how close, we can't. Just where my pointer is there is a leather cover. And we asked what that was, or we were told, and they said, oh, it's for the bats. We were quite puzzled. At night, they cover, or in the evening, they cover the tables with great big leather sheets. And then when it's dark, the bats come out, and the bats come out to live on the insects that want to eat the books. These are so ancient, they're actually all probably made of vellum or something, and they're very prone to insect attack. And so they actually keep a colony of bats in the roof of this marvelous building. I think that sort of somehow, it's a very nice way of doing some insect control. You don't have to spray stuff, but they do have to put the bats covers out, and then in the morning they collect them to get rid of the bat droppings. But it did seem, and this is of course a fully three-dimensional, the 360 immersive thing. Okay, stop that and finish up. Right, this is honestly, this is the last thing I'm going to mention. We could ask them, couldn't we? Do they cultivate the? Okay. A particular annoyance of mine currently. Sorry about this. This is what happens when you get nervous. Right. Okay. Recently, there's been quite a lot of, there was even a piece on the 1 o'clock news about immersivity. And they actually got a person who made immersive work, probably like me, and they brought an art dealer on as well. And the immersive person said, simply projecting things on walls isn't immersive. And of course, the art dealer said, oh, yes, it is. Now, those of you, how many of you have been to the Cube in London to see the Hockney show? Now, it's very nice. It is certainly enveloping. They project it onto 5 faces of a cube, but it doesn't immerse you. No, so that's my beef. And what is immersive? Well, this is. This is 2017, and this is a marvelous show put on by Matt Collishaw. You went to Laycock, the home of photography. Who have you been to? You saw it, did you, Nigel? Yeah. It was truly immersive. And it is people who haven't been immersed in one of these things, they can look at stuff projected on walls and say, God, immersive, and it bloody isn't. But so you went to Laycock, you went into a tent, and the tent was full of boxes. Here they are. And it was just a tent full of boxes. But you put a headset on. This is an example of a tethered headset from some time ago. And once you were actually wearing this, I could see this, but the wearer of the headset could see that. Let me get in a bit. So the illusion was complete and compelling. You were actually in a 19th century exhibition hall. And there were all sorts of marvelous little extra bits. Like there were windows. There was no windows in the tent, of course, but there were windows in the virtual space. And out through one of the windows, you heard a noise. And it was actually a parade of Chartists with flaming torches marching down the street, shouting about something, and they passed by the exhibition. It was marvelously informative. I think that Collishaw had a whole team of people from Sheffield University programming for him, but he did an extremely good job. I mean, to clad a wooden box like this and make it appear like a glass case full of interesting things that you could actually reach into and pick things up. It was very compelling indeed. And sorry, that's right. Yes, there was some kind of heater, and projected onto it was an open fire with coal and things, and you went over and you could warm yourself on this fire. It was a superb example, and anyone who's seen that realizes that nice though, and interesting though the exhibition in the Cube is, it is not immersive. Okay. Right. Had we had a room full of people, I would have happily said, look, who wants to sign up for some kind of workshop? Who wants to learn this sort of thing? But we can actually just have a conversation now, if you like. Anyone who wants to download Christoph's models, here's the address. And if anyone wants to look at some more of my stuff, there's that address. And my Brilsey address is here. You're welcome to drop me an email. Is it, with this small amount of people, is it worth even thinking about you having some kind of pano-making workshop in the spring? I take that as a no, which actually, of course, leaves me with lots of time to do, to do other things. But I thought I ought to ask. Okay, questions?
What would it involve? Can you be a bit more? The workshop you're offering that nobody's taking.
Yes, the huge album was overwhelmed. I was going to make it up about you want to stay on that. Oh, sorry. Go on, yes. Sorry, fellow Zoomers. Okay. I thought that we could do some very basic pano making and refine the techniques that are available currently on your phone. It means that there's no investment involved. We could, there's rudimentary pano capture stuff on phones nowadays. And if you do it a little bit better, if you perhaps also do it controlled on a tripod, you can get much better results. So I thought we could start with that, but also, of course, I would bring in bits of my own kit and let people play with them and see what they thought. Downstairs in one of the exhibit cases, there are some examples of bits of kit. Do go and have a look. We could lend those out. So I find making panoramas so compelling that I am quite keen to teach other people how to do it. I think in March I've got to go to the art school and show them, because they've of course got themselves a certain number of goggles. One of the things that we would do at such a workshop, of course, is bring goggles along. Now, how many people in this room have never used a VR headset? Well, you see, you ought to come at least once, because being immersed in a VR headset is extraordinary. It isn't at all like looking at, well, I mean, okay, if this was a VR photograph, you'd be here. And we could go to Coimbra and you could actually be in that library. It's the difference between looking at it and being in it. So I think that one of the things I would do is a number of demonstrations to get people immersed. Would that be interesting?
Yeah.
Okay, well then, you've got my
We would be enthusiastic as well, but we've already seen them, so.
you could come along and be an enthusiastic assistant if you like. But
John, could you invite viewers online if they'd like to place a question, put it in the chat room?
oh yes, do.
Is to repeat that because they have to hear through your
Right. Is there any question from the people online? Any interest in workshops? And would you like to post questions in the chat? Thank you. Any more questions here?
Could I ask, do drones have any use in camera?
Absolutely. There's a great deal of. Oh, sorry. There's a question in the room about the use of drones for panoramas. And the answer is there's a ton of work going on from people who, I actually own a drone, which I've never had time to use, but one day I shall get up there as well. I suppose the very tall poles with the camera on the top was the nearest I've got to drones, but
I was wondering about the stability of a drone.
Modern drones are extremely good, and they are very stable. And you can, yes, there's some stuff on one of the correspondence things currently, which people are worried about making seascapes through a drone, and they haven't got the quite control over the waves or something. But generally speaking, you can put these things right. The modern software is extremely effective, and it lets you take faults and correct them. But so the other day, I happened to find something in a discussion group, and somebody using a very expensive drone, about £4,000, I think, allowed us to download 50 shots and stitch them together, and that could be one of the sorts of things I could bring along, because the result of that, the resolution is extraordinary. So the fact is that drones are getting extremely good, and they're not just being used in Ukraine for dreadful purposes.
John, online, one of your viewers, one of your fans, a call said a workshop would be very good. How would they get in touch with you? Just by email?
Yes.
Can you say that that's what they should do?
Yes, indeed. Sorry, yes, please, anyone who's interested in a possible workshop in the spring, please get in touch. The email is john.law@brlsi.org, and I'd be happy to get things moving. We'll see what people are interested in. It might make me get going on drones. I know that Martin is a drone enthusiast, but as I say, I've got one on the bookshelf and never had time to use it. But the quality of drone panoramas is getting better all the time. They are. Paul?
Thinking about this amazing technology with which you can do so many things, do we have to bear in mind the possibility of faking pictures? For instance, we see on the television photographs of destruction in Ukraine or Gaza or wherever. Do you think that this sort of technology could be used for making that sort of?
I expect so. Oh, sorry. Yes, there's a question about faking things like bomb damage. I'm sure it could be done. It's something I wouldn't be very interested in doing, and hope you wouldn't either. But I think that we do now live in a culture, well, we always have, in which fakery has been a part of it. You know, fake paintings, fake photographs. You remember Lady Di sitting next to somebody, and then gradually the newspapers moved them around. Yeah, I don't think we can avoid it, but we will avoid it, but I don't think the world will.
Can I read out a question from online?
Please.
I'd like you to repeat, if you would.
Oh.
About 30 years ago, there was a panorama of modern Bath exhibited in Green Park and then later in London, because Bath couldn't provide a permanent space.
Oh.
Do you know where it is today?
No, I'm afraid. Do I repeat the whole thing?
If you could just say
there was a panoramic model of Bath that was exhibited in Green Park, and the question is, where is it now? The answer is, I don't know. I'd never even heard of it. It doesn't surprise me, but I'm afraid I've not even heard of it. I can tell you where the old gas and light building is. Sorry, very poor answer. Are we done?
I think that seems to be it online.
Thank you.
Can I just grab the microphone, the camera, and just say thank you ever so much, John. It's been a fascinating tour through the history of panoramas right up to the modern day, and a very intriguing offer to find out more for ourselves in the spring. So thank you very much indeed.